Okay, welcome back to Six Figure Certified Coach. I am Liv Chapman, the co-founder and CEO of Inner Glow Circle, and I am here today with Rozella White. Rozella is an IGC graduate, a graduate student, also an author and founder of RHW Consulting and Racial Healing and Wellness Coaching. And I know that's a lot and you're going to go into so much more detail, but welcome, Rozella, and we're so excited to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and to be in conversation with you.
Yes, it's about time. I think it's been over a year since we've reconvened and had a big conversation about what you're up to. And I'm excited to do that today. And I kind of just rattled off your resume, but I'd love to hear, from your point of view, in your own words, like, who are you? What is your mission? And how do you serve the world?
Yeah, well, I love those questions. And obviously, you all ask great questions as coach trainers and incredible coaches yourselves. So I go by the moniker of the Love Big Coach. And I understand my mission to be nurturing life-giving and justice-seeking love in this world so that all can thrive. I specifically coach around change management, transition, and conflict, which is interesting because when I first started coaching, I was very adamant against niching. Just because I'm a creative, I don't like to be put in a box. And then after a few years of coaching, some themes rose up with the work that I do. So I work specifically with women and then women-led and founded nonprofit organizations. And the theme that consistently comes up is around change and transition and how we navigate that. And even more specifically, my work is steeped in what I call a love ethic. So I talk about being a love big coach. And this love ethic is defined as that which creates, that which liberates, and that which brings about healing for the sake of holistic individual and collective transformation. So the way that looks in practice is that all of my coaching is focused on how we lean into change, transition, and conflict from this place of love, because love actually shifts culture. Love has the power to shift how we relate to ourselves and each other. And love is ultimately about leaning in with abundance rather than being led by fear and scarcity and those things that often bubble up in the midst of change, whether it's individual change or organizational change. So that's a little bit more about what I do and how I show up. And, it's interesting because we often say, go back to who you were and go back to what you did or how you showed up before the world taught you different. And I've always been a romantic. I've always been one who is uber sensitive and believes in love. And so as I've gotten older, it's been really about reclaiming that and tapping into it in ways that are much more expansive and not about the sentiment that we confuse with love, right, but about action, love as a force, and ultimately a way of being that brings about justice for all.
I'm just like blown away at your ability to just describe your mission. So it's like I hearing the mix of, conflict, right? And then coming from a place of love, it's like, of course, why wouldn't we do it that way? But I also think it's such a gap in society and even in individuals today. It's like, just because there's something wrong, right? Or some type of conflict or something that you're going through, there's still a way that you can present yourself back to that being coming from a place of love. And it has me thinking, I'm always trying to explain to people, like, what makes your, coach training different than others? I'm like, it's being-based coaching, right? It's rooted in ontology, which is the study of being. And that's like exactly what you're saying. It's like, how do you come from this place and embody that, place of love in order to take more profound and powerful action? And that's what you teach.
Absolutely. And both from what Inner Glow offers. One of the reasons that I love the coach training and even the graduate program that I'm in right now with Leaders Rising and just the community is that there are a few things that you all have said and that have been repeated by your trainers and by leaders within the organization around being-based coaching, around our relationships. And again, not relationships simply with people, but with mindsets, with beliefs, with ideas, and also about what grounds and roots us, right? And I talk about that as a spirituality. I think we talk about that writ large as spirituality, but energy and those three things around being, around relationships, and around, grounding are very important and are not something that a lot of coach training programs do. So it just, for
Right.
me, was a perfect match when I stumbled across you all, I'd say.
Yeah. I know that's a whole nother story too, but what you're saying too is of course, coming from a background of education, I want to go into your background too, because I feel like part of your story and having such a dynamic professional life coming up to coaching and kind of taking all of these
Mm,
aspects of your creative side and your, personal interests and your professions, and wrapping it all into a coaching business is really interesting. And I want to get there. But one of the things that also focus on is this, the ability to shift your mindset, right? And to
mm,
be able to experience challenges and conflicts and situations differently when you're able to do that. And like the point I was trying to make was that when I was in education, we didn't teach that, right? We didn't know how to do that, right? And so
mhm.
it's a real like gift to be able to learn that and to actually be able to act upon it. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about the mindset
Yeah.
stuff, but I know you're a genius when it comes to that.
Well, you're really kind, and I'm starting to claim, right, some of these gifts that I have in
Yeah.
ways that are about the confidence that I bring to this work, because I think that's been a struggle for me. But I often start off by saying I am not a believer in toxic positivity, right? Just
Right.
being positive, faking it till you make it, from a sense of ignoring or not really spending intentional time with that which breaks our heart. And that's, kind of how I talk about the grief of this world: death,
Right.
disease, disappointment, disconnection. I mean, I am a divorced woman who lives with major depressive disorder, who has experienced so much death, especially over the last few years. And so I never want people to hear me talk about mindset shifts from the standpoint of, oh, you just think positively, because we all know, right? It's not about
Right.
that. And I believe in the power that we all have to be actively involved in the life that we are living, and not just living, but co-creating. And this active involvement does require that we are intentional about how we spend our time, our energy, our resources, and how we actually pour into ourselves. And that, for me, becomes the basis of the mindset shift work that I do with clients. It's not about saying, oh, this thing is happening, this hard thing, this difficult thing, this grief inducing thing is happening, and we just move past it, right? Part
Mhm.
of what love invites us to is to actually lean into it and embrace it for all that it is, and recognize that our grief and our disappointment does have something to offer us. And it's not because I feel like it was caused because we have something to learn. I'm using air quotes, sorry,
Yeah.
listeners, but it's not something that I don't believe in this notion that there's this being, however we describe this energetic or heavenly or whatever being, that's like a puppet master that's throwing stuff our way to see how we're going to deal with it, or that's testing us. I really don't believe that.
Mhm.
And I believe that life is hard, right? That
Yeah.
suffering is a part of living. And I think that in the suffering and out of the suffering, if we are intentionally taking time to reflect and to discern and to heal, right? And that's a lifelong thing. Then I think there are these nuggets that are revealed along the way. And that's what I really want people to embrace, right? When we talk about the mindset shift. So, how is it that last year I buried, 8 people in my family, that we had all sorts of folks die, both from COVID and also suddenly, that my best friend died, a year ago, now almost 2 years ago, that both of my parents were diagnosed with cancer in the last year, that, all of these things are happening. Even in my own life, I had COVID and was hospitalized and was out of
Right.
commission for 6 months. So it's not like, I think about the Langston Hughes quote, I think life for me ain't been no crystal stair.
Mhm.
And right, each of those experiences invited me to lean in much more intentionally to the power of love, of heartache, and ultimately of healing. And that's what I want for people, like to embrace the suffering of their life in a different way.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that too. I actually was wondering, how much you would want to share, but I do know that part of your journey, and I've only known you now for a couple of years, but you've been so, brave and courageous and open with sharing a lot of these parts of, your story and what's going on for you. And also been, a true model for what you're coaching around and speaking about. And I know maybe it doesn't always feel like that. I saw the look on your face, but I think that that's, this is a question is, do you feel as though, offering this insight and this work is also part of how you're able to experience some of life suffering in a different way?
Absolutely, right. I used to say in my previous career in life as a speaker and a public theologian and thought leader that pay attention to the things people talk about the most, because it's going to give you insight into what they also struggle with or what they're working out in real time, right? And
Yes.
so I feel like one of the reasons that I've been led into this work is because it's a consistent theme in my own life, right? How do we thrive and not simply survive, but thrive through the seasons of life, through the changes, through the transitions, and through the conflict that that brings up? Because ultimately, right, change and transition are disruptive forces. And I use
Right.
disruptive as a neutral term. It's not good, bad, or indifferent. It just is. When we're faced with change, when we're faced with transition, things are shifted. Our life, it shifts us. And the question becomes is how do we want to engage that shift? And I am constantly wondering about that myself and dealing with that myself. And so that's the thing that I've been coaching around. And I actually find it's ongoing, it continues in my ongoing healing and the journey of healing for me, because healing is never done and it just
Right.
takes us deeper. And then that pushes me to be more intentional about whether it's my own training or my own development, or, I'm really big on, I can't share stuff with clients if I haven't actually practiced it or embraced it myself. And
Right.
so I think it makes me a better coach, if I'm honest.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of women too who, come into coaching because they've had so much suffering or grief or trauma even. And they're like, what do I do with all of this? Like, I want to
Yes.
kind of fuel it into something greater, right? And I do think we have to go through the process ourselves to be able to, then, support other people. But it's a constant state of self-awareness, right? And
Yeah.
checking in with yourself. And I love what you said too about look at what you're saying and what you're talking about, because that's probably also what we're working on. And I'm thinking to myself, like parenting relations, like, the same reel over and over. I'm
Yes.
like, oh, I'm sharing
Yes.
this because I'm going through it, right?
Yes.
And that's also like the key to, vulnerability is also the key to connection, which we know is without that trust and intimacy and connection, there's really no coaching that can happen. So
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
And that's again one of the things I love about Inner Glow, and not just the method, but the pedagogy, the ways that you all talk about coaching, because it really is about accompanying and companioning. Like
Yeah.
I'll make up words, but people right through whatever they're
Yeah.
experiencing. And there's something to be said about coaching from a place not where we're like bleeding out, coaching from a place that is still tender within us because we've done the work around the healing that. And so to coach from the tender spot, I think connects us more deeply with our clients.
Totally. Totally. And I do think that it, ultimately creates greater, more long lasting change and transformation
Mhm.
and results because you're really digging in and you're, being sometimes in the muck with people, right? And then sometimes in the celebration and the acknowledgement. And
Yeah.
um, so you mentioned this a couple of times in kind of explaining who you are and what you do, but you have a background in being a faith leader, right? And in theology and like an
Yeah.
author. So like, how did all roads lead to Rome here, right?
Man. Oh man. I wonder about this all the time. But I mean, essentially, I've always felt, using faith words, again, here are my air quotes, but I've always felt called to um, accompanying people, right? Supporting people throughout life's many varied circumstances. And the way that that was embodied most recently was through faith leadership. So I came up and through a mainline Protestant denomination, one of the largest in the United States. And it's progressive in its teachings and leanings, and was a member of a congregation, was a youth leader, worked at camps, did youth ministry, went to seminary, and did everything, but never felt called to traditional congregational ministry. I had served in congregations, doing things around faith formation and family ministries. And while I loved that work, I felt like congregational ministry in and of itself was very, I mean, and it's very insular, right? It's not as inclusive as we'd like to think. It's exclusive. Being a part of a church or a religious denomination, for that matter, is exclusive, because you're saying that you believe in certain doctrine and ways of being. And so if you don't believe those things, you probably are not a member of or connected with.
Right.
And so I think I always struggled with that, because I always felt like my call was to that which was more inclusive and went outside kind of traditional ways of belonging, if you will. And after kind of working in some local settings, at that point I was married and I started my PhD work and was serving as a hospital chaplain. And in that chaplaincy season of my life, I was a hospital chaplain for about a year. I worked a lot with patients who were either hospice or palliative care. So when traditional ways of treating are no longer effective, and then you're creating new systems of support as people are dealing with kind of those end of life decisions or transition decisions. I was a chaplain that supported folks in that season of life and their families. And for the first time, I was like, oh, I can do this kind of ministry. Like, this makes sense to me, because the role of the chaplain is not about conversion. It's not about teaching. It's about listening and supporting. And so that just really resonated with me. And then life happens as it does, right? I went through a divorce and was invited to apply for some a position within my denomination in the national offices. And at that point was like, I'll put PhD studies on hold and I'll do this thing because, gotta make money. And moved to Chicago. So at that point I had been living in Atlanta, moved to Chicago to serve on the national staff. And that opportunity gave me a national platform. So I was able to, much of my role during that time was as a thought leader in the area of formation, leadership development, and anti-racism, multicultural stuff. I'll just use that as the kind of all-encompassing term. And so I did that work and had done some of that work as a contract worker before with the denomination, but was now full-time doing it. There were moments when I enjoyed when I actually got to do the work of supporting people, of speaking, of connecting, but ultimately really struggled with what I called like a misalignment, right? Of who I was and who I was becoming, and who the denomination and organization was. And that led me through a whole process of grief when it became clear that we weren't aligned. And it was less about me being a change maker in that space or trying to get the organization and institution to be something it wasn't, and more about me embracing what was. And what was is that the organization was not ready, capable, and are willing, I think, in some spaces to really engage the issues that were facing us as a church, as a voice that was invited to get people thinking about who they were and how they were in the lens of faith and in light of the injustices that we were seeing. And I can't say all of this without also recognizing that this was also the time of massive deaths of Black and Brown people at the hands of police, and violence that was occurring, and the racial uprising that we're still seeing in the United States. And so I really struggled with that, because I am an activist and I am someone who speaks out unapologetically and does so, at least did so from a faith vantage point. And so I had to make some decisions. And the decision that I did make was that I was no longer be able to live my truest self and live out who I was in that space. And so I decided to leave and come back home to Houston. And at that point, I knew that I was called to create something. And I don't even think then, which was 2016, and I eventually left in July of 2016, I don't think then I still knew what that was. Like, I found it, I did my DBA and was doing consulting. And because of the relational capital I had amassed over almost 2 decades, I was able to kind of hit the ground running with events and speaking, and I had been writing. And as I was doing that, I was definitely more in the consultant space of coming in as the expert or as the subject matter content expert or whatever. And I really didn't like the fact that there was this like assumption that I knew things that other people didn't, and
Mm.
B, that I was expected to do the work for people, and C, a lot of times we would, do work, or I would be invited to write reports and they would just sit on a shelf. Like
Right.
there wasn't like this embodied change. And that led me to then wonder more about coaching. And the more that I did research around coaching, I was like, oh, I've been doing this in a lot of ways. And I think I want to explore like the actual formal frameworks around coaching and make a shift from a consultant to a coach. And so it was hastened because of COVID,
Yeah.
because my business model was built on in-person events and speaking. And so when COVID happened, it actually became a perfect opportunity for me to sign up for coach training, which I did in the fall of 2020, and
Crazy. Yeah.
I haven't looked back, right? Like it's just been incredible. And so I shifted. At the first shift was in my consulting to go towards coaching of individuals and organizations. That led to also the formation of a different business, the racial healing and wellness coaching
Yeah.
business. And it's actually, I'm in the midst of a third shift right now, which I'm
No,
excited
I
to share.
didn't even know.
I know.
Wait, I want you to share it, but also just like,
Yes.
thank you for sharing. I think that some people are like, I know I want to do this, but I don't like feel like I'm ready or I've had the professional or personal experience. But like when you actually look at your life, it's like you've been getting these hints, right? And it's
Yes.
that level. And like I acknowledge you too for just being willing to get so aware. It's like, I like this part of what I'm doing in this career path. I like this part of what I'm doing here. And
Yep.
instead of ignoring those signs, saying like, I'm open to the next step and the next evolution and the next revelation of, where I'm going. Because I think so often we're like, well, I know it's not exactly this, but it's close enough. And I don't know if anything else out there exists that's exactly what I want to be doing. And like sometimes the job doesn't exist yet, right? Sometimes
Yes, exactly.
you kind of, and I love and acknowledge you for, taking all those hints and then just saying, and now here's where we're at, and this is the evolution. And I know, Katie and I had been on one of your lives
Yeah.
with the racial healing and wellness coaching. And now you have to tell us what the next phase is, because
Yeah.
unless
Well,
are you ready to announce it?
yeah, I am. Well, and part of it is what's happening with RHW Consulting, right? So racial
Okay.
healing and wellness coaching was developed as a cohort-based experience for women who are committed to radical racial healing and wellness, and to deconstructing and dismantling, right? All of these ways of being that have both been oppressive to us and that we have also used to oppress others, even unknowingly.
Right.
And so we work with white women, Black women, non-Black women of color, and eventually teen girls through these cohort processes that also include who we call companions, who are the same racial background as the participants, to journey with them through that. So I'm really excited about that. We're about to launch the Black Women. So we're doing a conversation series next week around We Rise, Radical Refuge for the Black Woman. That was the beginning of our kickoff for a cohort for Black women. But with RHW Consulting, one of the things I realized, because I was not a business owner, I was entrepreneurial, which is
Right.
very
Okay.
different, right? You know this, than
Yeah.
being a business owner.
Yep.
And one of the things, again, that I value about Inner Glow was that it helped us think about not just the skills of coaching and who we are as coaches, but also what does it mean to build a business around coaching. And so the thing that's emerged for me recently has been that I want RHW Consulting to actually be a coaching agency that works with women coaches who are committed to this love ethic, but that also is able to provide support for coaches who are coaching, and
Yeah.
also work with organizations and continue to expand this work. Because the other thing I've recognized is that there are so many coaches who are incredible coaches and who are not and do not want to be business owners.
Yep.
And so much of this industry is about, being a hustler, which I actually love and want to create more businesses. So I'm already looking at what the next business is that I create.
I love that about you.
And I'm a hustler.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I can work with women coaches who are in alignment with this love ethic and coach from that place, right? I'm not interested in training coaches. I'm not interested in a coaching school. Or being a coach that coaches people around business, because there's so many, that's a necessary field. I
Right.
actually employ different coaches around that. but I'm interested in creating community and opportunities for coaches who are good at what they do and who are not interested in the business ownership part of it. So,
Yeah.
so that's kind of the next phase and
It's
move.
so brilliant. It's so brilliant. And one of the things that I've been saying to a lot of the women who are coming into training, and they're like, how do I, because we have the same conversation, right? To niche or not to niche. And, how do I pick this thing? And one of the things that I love that people are doing is really creating their own methodology or framework
Mhm.
or, code of ethics or, whatever they want to call it. And it's not like training to, be a coach in the traditional ICF core competency skill set, right? You already need that, but then kind of, wrapping it up in some particular methodology or belief system or, way of coaching. And it sounds kind of like that's, what you're doing, bringing in that love ethic, I think you called it, or.
Yes, yeah. And it's building on the work of people that I learned from and listened to, right? Like I
Yeah,
think about Bell Hooks and Cornell West and
that's what I
others
was
that
thinking.
have, right? Like that have done this work in different areas, right? Whether it's
Yeah.
cultural criticism, religion, justice, activism. Well, what does this mean for the work that we do? And especially the work that we do around change and
Mhm.
change management. I feel like it's a necessary thing. And so I'm going to operate as if.
Beautiful. I can't wait to see it launch. And of course, you have the full support of your IGC community, who I have a
Thank
feeling
you.
some of them may or may not be like, I'm working for Rozella now. Okay, go ahead.
Working with Rozella, but
Exactly,
absolutely.
exactly. So as we kind of get towards the end of this, like you've been public about this, at least inside of IGC, like you have, hit six figures, right? Not just financially, but, we say like 6-figure certified often is beyond financial, right? Because
Yeah.
you could be making all of the money in the world, but if you're miserable or you're unsatisfied or you're unfulfilled, it doesn't even matter, right? So I would love to know, and I have these, do you remember the 5 key pieces of your 6-figure success story that you sent me?
Oh, no, I don't. What did I say?
Let me tell you what you said, and then if you want to elaborate. One, mindset shift. We already talked about that, right?
Yeah.
The other piece that you said contributed to your, 6-figure success is focus, planning, and consistency.
Oh, yes. And it's right here. Like it's right here on my desk. Yes. Oh,
Um,
and it's interesting. Yeah. But what were the other ones? And then I can speak to
investing in
them. Yeah.
yourself,
Yep.
village support. I would love if you just elaborated on that one a little bit.
Yes. Yeah.
And then, of
Okay.
course, taking a risk and leaping before you're air quotes or quote unquote ready.
Yeah. So village support, I'll start there. Like in this past year, I've actually moved back home. And it is, we call it the family compound. It's 8
Oh,
of us under one roof. It's my parents. My dad was diagnosed with prostate cancer last June and had surgery and is fine, on the mend, no traces of
oh,
cancer.
amazing.
My mom was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer in November. And so we are in the midst of, my dad says it's a fight for her life. And this particular season, prognosis is good, but she's
Yeah.
in chemo weekly and it was like 24 rounds of chemo. So we just hit the halfway point. And
Wow.
then my brother and his wife and their 3 kids are here. And so my sister-in-law is an incredible woman who is of Venezuelan descent and is working on her path to citizenship right now, which is a whole other conversation because in this country it is almost impossible
Right.
to do that, especially if you're from the global south. And then they have 3 kids, my teen niece and nephew who are 16 and 15. And then we call the little imp, Jimena, who is 6, who runs us all, right?
Uh,
And we made the intentional decision to consolidate under our family home roof for a couple of reasons. One, we are folks, we're Black and brown folks, so my family is Black and Latino, and we are really the first generation that has the opportunity to do things differently and shift the narrative. And so we knew that we wanted to do that intentionally. And we knew that in order to do that, because we don't have access to reserves in terms of wealth or other things, that we had to do some things that are seemingly radical in our culture, but from our societies are not, right? To live
right.
together makes a lot of sense. And that, along with my communities of support in terms of my friend circles, have been non-negotiable. And I've also been seeking out more communities of support professionally. So whether it's IGC or I recently completed the alt MBA, and that was a total transformative experience. And then I'm a part of Rachel Rogers' Hello Seven, her
Yes.
club. So like all of these pieces and places have helped remind me of who I am, especially in those moments when I forget and or the insecurities rise, because they're still there, and help me stay accountable. And then in terms of focus planning consistency, I literally have it written down in a few places. So I also live with ADHD, and that just is a thing. Like it's something that I can't ignore. And instead of trying to change it, it's like leaning into it, much like the use of love. And I know that to be focused, to plan, and to be consistent is what allows me to make some moves and changes. And it's a constant work. Like it's not something that I have figured out fully, but it leads me to slow down. It leads me to be more intentional, and it leads me to follow through. And those are the things that I think have allowed for this particular season, whether it's six-figure income or lifestyle, to actually manifest themselves. And so, yeah, it's been an incredible journey. And if I'm really honest, I didn't even realize I'd hit six figures, which gives you all the information you need to know about how I don't track my finances. And I'm actually working with a financial coach now because it's
Look
a
at you,
problem.
good, right?
Because it's like, wait, how did this happen? Oh, this
Been
did
there.
happen. And now I need to make it happen again and again and again until we get to, you know, our goal of millionaire status before or by the time I'm 45. So I've got like 4 years. And here we go.
Let's go. I have no doubt in my mind that that'll happen for you. Just knowing you, I can already see it. So one of my favorite questions, next question, how did you get your first coaching client? People love to know that. Do you remember?
You know, I don't necessarily remember, because it was tied up with leaving the life that I had before. And I'm pretty sure it was a young adult. So I worked a lot with young adults, people between the ages of 18 and 30. And I'm pretty sure that they were in the midst of making decisions about what was next. But I often tell people that like I didn't just arrive here. And so it was like 10 plus years of relational engagement that I feel like greased the wheel, if you will, for me. So I was able to say, hey, I can support you in that way. And this is what it'll look like. And they were able to say yes. And it was uber affordable. I mean, from the standpoint of the population that I was working with at that point. So yeah, but I don't know that I can remember the specifics of it, but those are some of the characteristics that come to mind.
So it's relationship building, right? And
absolutely
being willing to say, hey, I can help you with that. And I think that in and of itself is a practice that a lot of, you know, new entrepreneurs and new coaches can even take on. And something that of course we teach in IGC, like, you know, referrals and connecting with the people who already, you know, like, and trust you, which I know is like an overused phrase, but thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it is. I mean, all of my first clients came from me emailing like past, you know, friends from college and colleagues and, you know, people who I knew trusted me. Right. And similar to you, like I had very, very good deal, right? Like very good, affordable price points. And was able to really practice coaching and also make sure that I loved it as much as I had thought I did, right? Because in theory, like have a coaching business, it's great. But if you don't love what you do and the conversations you're having, right? Like wherever you go, there you are. So you're going to run into those same anxieties and issues and all of that. So
absolutely.
I know everybody's going to want to connect with you after hearing this episode and hearing your story. So tell us where we can find you online. And of course, our show notes will have all of these links too.
So I am at Love Big Coach on every platform, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I think I have a Pinterest, but we haven't started doing anything with that yet. And TikTok, which is coming, which I just am like, oh Lord, here we go. And then my website is my name, rozellahwhite.com. And both of those places in terms of social media and website, you can find more information about how to work with me and what's happening. I'm about to roll out some group coaching offerings for folks, especially the first one will be around women and grief. So navigating grief and the disruption that grief brings up. I'll also be doing a coaching group later this year around deconstructing. So for those women who are like me that come from faith backgrounds that may not have always been the most life-giving, but still want to hold on to something that was shared and want to do that in a way that is supported. I'll be offering a group experience for that and some group offerings for women who are in leadership, both faith-based and nonprofit leadership. So all of that information is forthcoming and can be found in all those places.
Awesome. And so just click on the show notes. Be sure to follow Rozella on whatever platform you like best, because she is or will be on all of them. And you'll be able to get all of those updates there. But I want to thank you for being here and sharing, your story, because I think that it's going to move a lot of people, into seeing those hints and becoming more self-aware and understanding that, every experience that they've had, right? Whether it's grief or suffering or aha moments of, glory can all lead you and be hints towards, the most aligned path. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, can I curse on this? Is that a thing?
yeah, go ahead.
So I think about life, the shit of life can become the most beautiful compost, right? And that's the goal, right? Is how we compost our experiences. And it's neither here nor there. Like it's not something that's happening to us just because, right? But sometimes like life is hard and will continue to throw stuff our way. And to be able to be supported in that is my goal, to offer that support to people. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.